You're beneath me. His fiancée refused to shake a maid's Toddler's hand, until the billionaire introduced her as his daughter. I still can't believe this actually happened. And after tonight, I don't think anyone in that ballroom will ever forget it either. Picture this. Chandeliers dripping gold light, 300 of the wealthiest people in the city dressed like they walked out of a magazine, and one little 3-year-old girl in a second-hand yellow dress, standing quietly beside her mother, who was there to serve drinks. Nobody in that room expected a toddler to bring a 37-year-old billionaire to his knees. Nobody expected his own fiancée to be the one who set it all in motion. But by the end of the night, the truth came out in front of everyone, and it changed 4 lives forever. Hey, before we dive in, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we tell real, raw, emotional stories about love, family, and the moments that change everything. Let me know in the comments, which country are you watching from today? I love seeing how far these stories travel. Today's story is about pride, secrets, and a little girl who didn't even know she was about to shake up an entire family. Stay with me till the end, because what happens in the middle of this story will leave you speechless. She thought she was just there to pour champagne. She had no idea she was about to change everything. Maria Alvarez had worked as a housekeeper for the Whitfield family for almost 4 years. She started when she was 26, fresh off a difficult divorce, needing steady work and a place to put her energy that wasn't grief. The Whitfield estate, tucked into the hills outside Charleston, South Carolina, was the kind of property that made first-time visitors stop the car just to stare. White columns, magnolia trees older than the house itself, and a view of the water that looked painted on. Daniel Whitfield was the man who owned it all. 37 years old, CEO of a shipping and logistics empire his grandfather had built from a single boat and a stubborn dream. Daniel had inherited more than money. He'd inherited the weight of a name everyone in the state recognized. He was polite, disciplined, and according to most people who worked for him, lonelier than anyone with that much success had any right to be. Maria and Daniel's relationship began the way these things sometimes do in quiet houses. Slowly, and without either of them meaning for it to happen. A conversation in the kitchen that ran too long. A rainy night when the power went out and they ended up laughing over candlelight instead of panicking. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to become anything, but it did. When Maria found out she was pregnant, she made a decision that would define the next 3 years of her life. She didn't tell Daniel. She told herself it was to protect him. A man about to be engaged to someone from his own social circle didn't need a scandal attached to his name. But if she was honest with herself, some nights, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment with her daughter Lily asleep beside her, she knew it was also to protect herself. She didn't want to be the housekeeper who trapped a billionaire. She didn't want Lily to grow up as a rumor before she grew up as a person. So Maria raised Lily alone. She kept working for the Whitfield family because the pay was good and, if she was being truthful, because some small part of her still wanted to be near Daniel, even if he never knew why. She told him she'd taken in her sister's daughter when he'd occasionally seen Lily on the property. Daniel, distracted by boardrooms and shareholders and a life that moved faster than most people could keep up with, never asked too many questions. He liked Lily. He'd sometimes crouch down and let her show him her drawings, unaware that the curve of her smile was an exact copy of his late mother's. 3 years passed like this. Quiet secrets. Small lies that felt harmless because nobody was getting hurt. Or so Maria told herself. Then Daniel got engaged. Her name was Vanessa Cole, the daughter of a real estate mogul, polished and confident in the way people are when they've never once had to wonder if they belonged in a room. Vanessa was beautiful, sharp, and ambitious. She and Daniel made sense on paper. Same circles, same expectations, same understanding of what kind of life they were both signing up for. Maria watched the engagement announcement from the kitchen doorway, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, and felt something in her chest quietly break, even though she told herself she had no right to feel that way. She had made her choice years ago. She'd chosen silence. She couldn't be upset that the life she'd walked away from was now being lived by someone else. But there was one thing Maria hadn't accounted for. Daniel had decided to host a massive engagement gala at the estate, the kind of event that would be photographed for society pages and talked about for months. 300 guests, a live orchestra, and because it was tradition in the Whitfield family for staff's children to be present during major family celebrations, a small kindness Daniel's late mother had insisted on decades ago, Lily would be there too, dressed in her best yellow dress, standing near her mother by the edge of the ballroom. Maria almost didn't bring her. She thought about calling in sick, finding a babysitter, anything to avoid the possibility of being in that room while Daniel slow danced with another woman under lights that used to feel, in some secret corner of her heart, like maybe they could have been hers. But Lily had been so excited. She'd twirled around their apartment for a week, asking if there would be a real princess party. And Maria, worn down by 3 years of carrying a secret alone, didn't have the heart to say no. So that night, she took her daughter's small hand, smoothed down her yellow dress one more time, and walked into a ballroom full of people who had no idea that the biggest secret in the Whitfield family was standing quietly by the dessert table, holding a napkin and watching the chandelier lights with wide, curious eyes. Neither of them knew that by the end of the night, that little hand would be the thing that changed everything. Nobody in that ballroom expected the bride-to-be to be the one who exposed the truth without even meaning to. The gala was in full swing by 9 o'clock. String lights wrapped around the garden trees outside spilled gold through the tall windows, and the orchestra played something soft and hopeful while champagne flowed and laughter echoed off the marble floors. Vanessa Cole moved through the crowd like she'd been born for exactly this, greeting business partners by name, laughing at the right moments, her diamond ring catching the light every time she gestured with her hand. Daniel stood near the center of the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, playing the role expected of him. But every so often, his eyes drifted toward the edge of the room, toward the staff quietly working the event, and toward a small girl in a yellow dress who kept sneaking glances at the dessert table like she was trying to work up the courage to ask for a second cookie. He didn't know why, but something about her always made him feel lighter. He assumed it was just the innocent joy children carry into any room. He had no idea the feeling ran deeper than that. Around 9:45, Vanessa decided it was time to formally greet the household staff, a gesture her wedding planner had suggested to appear warm and approachable for the photographers documenting the event for a lifestyle magazine feature. She moved down the line of staff with practiced grace, shaking hands, offering polite compliments, every motion camera ready. Then she reached Maria. "And this must be your daughter," Vanessa said, glancing down at Lily with a tight, performative smile of someone more interested in the photo op than the person in front of her. Lily, sweet and unfiltered the way only a 3-year-old can be, reached her small hand upward, the way she'd been taught to greet grown-ups. "Hi, I'm Lily." Vanessa's smile faltered for just a second, a flicker most people in the room wouldn't have caught. But Daniel, standing only a few feet away, saw it clearly. Vanessa looked at Lily's outstretched hand, then glanced quickly at the photographer nearby, calculating and said, loud enough for the small circle around her to hear, "Oh, that's all right, sweetheart. Let's not. We don't want to smudge anything before pictures." She didn't shake the little girl's hand. She stepped back slightly, redirected her attention to a business partner's wife standing nearby, and moved on as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Lily's small hand remained in the air for a second too long before she slowly lowered it, her bright expression dimming into confusion. Maria's stomach dropped. She'd seen enough subtle cruelty in wealthy circles to recognize exactly what that gesture meant. "You're beneath me. Not worth touching. Not worth the risk to my perfect appearance tonight." She quickly knelt down, pulling Lily gently against her side. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Some grown-ups are just silly sometimes." But Daniel had seen the entire exchange, and something about it lit a slow, unfamiliar anger in his chest, an anger he didn't yet understand the full weight of. He walked over, his voice calm but firm. "Vanessa, is everything all right?" Vanessa turned, all charm again. "Of course. I just didn't want the little one's hands smudging anything before the photos, that's all. You know how these things go." She laughed lightly, glancing at the small crowd around them for validation, but no one laughed back. Daniel looked down at Lily, who was staring at her shoes now. Her earlier joy replaced with the quiet shame children absorb so easily, even when they don't fully understand why. Something about that expression struck him harder than he expected. He crouched down to her eye level. "Hey," he said gently. "Do you want to say hi to me instead?" Lily's face lit up instantly, all embarrassment forgotten. "Hi, Mr. Daniel." He smiled, took her small hand, and shook it properly, the way he would shake the hand of anyone he respected. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily." The gesture, small as it seemed, drew quiet attention from a few guests nearby. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Daniel, we should mingle," she said, touching his arm. "The Hendersons just arrived." He nodded, standing back up, but something had shifted in him. He glanced at Maria, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite place. Gratitude maybe, but also something like fear. He didn't understand it yet. But he would very soon. Because as the night went on, and Daniel found himself unable to stop thinking about the strange tightness in his chest every time he looked at that little girl, an old memory began surfacing. A conversation with his late mother years ago about keeping an open heart when the world tries to close it for you. He remembered his mother's words about how children never lie. Not really, not about what matters. And later that night, walking past his study, he would overhear two housekeepers whispering about how much Lily looks just like him. A comment they clearly thought no one important could hear. That single sentence would send him down a path that would unravel 3 years of carefully guarded secrets. And by the time the truth came fully into the light, nothing in that house, or in his engagement, would ever be the same again. He thought he was imagining things, until he saw the photograph that proved he wasn't. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. The overheard comment replayed in his mind on a loop. How much Lily looks just like him. At first, he told himself it was nothing. People said things like that about children all the time, especially children who spent a lot of time around a household. But something about the specific way the housekeeper had said it, hushed and almost cautious, gnawed at him. Around midnight, still in his formal shirt with the top buttons undone, he found himself standing in the estate's private study, staring at a framed photograph of his late mother from decades ago. The same photograph the older staff sometimes compared Lily to when they thought no one was listening. He stared at it for a long time. The shape of the eyes. The particular curve of the smile. The small dimple that appeared only on the left side. It was almost identical to a photo he'd seen of Lily just hours earlier, laughing at something Maria had said near the dessert table. His heart began pounding in a way it hadn't in years. Not during million-dollar negotiations, not during his father's funeral, not even during his own engagement announcement. This was different. This was the particular terror of a man realizing a puzzle piece he never knew was missing might have just clicked into place. He thought back. 3 years ago. Maria. The rainy night the power went out. The months after when she'd become quieter, more distant, before eventually telling him she was taking in her sister's daughter. He'd never met this sister. He'd never questioned why. Daniel sat down heavily in his chair, his mind moving faster than he could process. If this was true, if Lily was truly his daughter, then Maria had carried this secret alone for 3 years. Raised his child alone, worked in his house alone, watched him fall in love with someone else and plan a wedding, all while holding something this enormous inside her. He didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, he found Maria in the East Wing, folding linens with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. He closed the door behind him, which was unusual enough that Maria immediately looked up, sensing something had changed. "Daniel, is something wrong?" He didn't know how to ease into it, so he didn't try. Is Lily my daughter? The linens slipped from Maria's hands. For a long moment she said nothing at all, her face cycling through panic, then something like exhaustion, then finally, a kind of surrender that comes only after years of carrying something too heavy for one person alone. Daniel, please, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Just tell me the truth. Maria's eyes filled with tears she'd clearly been holding back for years. Yes, she whispered. She's yours. The room went silent except for the distant sound of gardeners trimming hedges outside the window, an absurdly peaceful backdrop for a conversation that was quietly detonating a life Daniel thought he understood completely. 3 years, he said, almost to himself. 3 years, Maria. You let me miss 3 years of her life. I didn't know what else to do, Maria said, her voice breaking. You were about to be engaged. You had this whole world planned out, and I was your housekeeper. Who was going to believe that wasn't some kind of scheme? I didn't want Lily to grow up as a scandal. I didn't want her to be the reason people looked at you differently. You should have told me, he said, though there was no real anger left in his voice now, only grief. I would have, Maria, I would have shown up. Every single day. I would have found a way to make this right, no matter what people said. I know that now, she whispered. I was scared. And I know that's not a good enough reason. But I was so scared. Daniel sank into the chair by the window, running both hands over his face. Outside, he could hear Lily's laughter drifting up from the garden, where she was playing with the other staff's children, completely unaware that inside the house, the entire foundation of her small world had just cracked open. He thought about Vanessa, about the wedding invitations already being printed, about the seating charts and floral arrangements and a life that had, until last night, felt entirely settled. And he thought about the way Vanessa had refused to shake his daughter's hand. Something in him hardened at that memory now, in a way it hadn't fully allowed itself to the night before. He had ignored dozens of small moments like that over the past year. The way Vanessa spoke to staff, the subtle superiority in her tone, the way she seemed to categorize people into those worth her time and those who weren't. He'd told himself it was just old money habits, nothing that reflected on her character. But last night she had looked at his daughter, his own flesh and blood, though she didn't know it, and decided she wasn't worth touching. He stood up slowly, his decision beginning to take shape even before he fully understood its consequences. Maria, he said quietly, I need you to bring Lily to the ballroom tonight. There's a small closing dinner for the remaining out-of-town guests. I want her there, properly, not as staff's daughter, as mine. Maria's eyes widened. Daniel, are you sure? Once you say it out loud, there's no taking it back. I know, he said. I'm done hiding things that shouldn't have to be hidden. Nobody expected the billionaire to stand up in front of everyone and change his own daughter's future in front of the entire family. The closing dinner that evening was smaller than the gala. Perhaps 60 guests, mostly extended family and close business associates who had stayed the extra day for a more intimate farewell gathering before returning to their separate corners of the country. Vanessa had specifically requested this dinner to properly introduce herself as part of the family to Daniel's closest relatives, most of whom she'd only met briefly. She had no idea her fiancé had spent the entire day preparing something far different from the evening she'd envisioned. Maria arrived with Lily just as the appetizers were being cleared, both of them dressed simply. Maria in a modest navy dress, Lily in the same yellow dress from the night before. Her hair now neatly braided with a small ribbon Maria had added at the last minute, her hands shaking as she did it. You don't have to do this if you're scared, Maria had whispered to her daughter in the car. I'm not scared, Lily had said simply, in the fearless way small children often are, unaware of the size of the moment ahead of her. Mr. Daniel is nice. When they walked into the dining room, conversation didn't stop immediately. Most guests assumed it was simply staff attending to something. But then Daniel stood from his seat at the head of the table, and the room slowly quieted as everyone registered that something unusual was happening. "I want to thank everyone for being here this weekend," Daniel began, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. "This has been an important few days for me, for reasons some of you already understand, and reasons that others are about to." Vanessa smiled, clearly assuming this was leading toward a toast about their engagement. She reached for his hand. Daniel gently didn't take it. Instead, he walked around the table to where Maria and Lily stood near the doorway. "Last night," he continued, "something happened at the gala that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Some of you saw it. A little girl reached out her hand to greet someone, and that hand was refused." Vanessa's smile faded slightly, confusion crossing her features. "I want to introduce someone to all of you properly," Daniel said, crouching down beside Lily and taking her small hand in his, the same way he had the night before. "This is Lily. And as of this morning, I learned something I should have known for 3 years." He paused, looking up at the room full of stunned faces. "Lily is my daughter." The silence that followed was the kind that seemed to physically press against the walls of the room. Forks paused midair. Someone's glass clinked softly against a plate before going still. Vanessa's face went through a rapid, visible transformation. Shock, confusion, and then a dawning, horrified understanding. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "Maria worked in this house for the past 4 years, Daniel said, standing back up, keeping one hand gently on Lily's shoulder. 3 years ago, before you and I ever met, Maria and I had a relationship. She became pregnant, and out of fear of exactly this kind of reaction, she chose not to tell me. I only learned the truth this morning." "You're telling me," Vanessa said, her voice rising, "that the housekeeper's daughter is actually—" "She's not the housekeeper's daughter," Daniel interrupted, his voice firm but not cruel. "She's my daughter. And last night you looked at her, at my child, and decided she wasn't worth shaking her hand because you were worried about photographs." Vanessa's face flushed deep red, aware suddenly that every eye in the room was on her. "That's not. I didn't know, obviously I wouldn't have." "That's exactly the problem," Daniel said quietly. "You didn't know she was mine, and you still treated her like she was beneath you. That tells me everything I need to know about how you actually see people who don't have money or status. I've ignored it for months because I told myself it didn't matter. But it matters more than anything." Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're ending our engagement. Over this. Over some maid and her kid." The room's collective intake of breath was audible. Even some of Vanessa's own defenders at the table visibly recoiled at the phrase. Daniel looked at her steadily. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." He slid the engagement ring box, the one he'd have needed to formally return, per family tradition, in front of witnesses, onto the table between them. "I think it's best if you head home tonight, Vanessa. I'll have my assistant handle the arrangements." Vanessa looked around the table for support and found none. Even her own parents, seated near the end, looked down at their plates, unwilling to meet her eyes. She grabbed her purse and, without another word, walked briskly from the room, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor until the front door slammed in the distance. The room remained silent for a long moment after she left. Then slowly Daniel's aunt, an elderly woman who had known him since he was a boy, rose from her seat, walked over to Lily, and knelt down in front of her. "Hello, sweetheart," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm your great-aunt Louise. It's wonderful to finally meet you." Lily, delighted, shook her hand enthusiastically. "Hi. I like your necklace." The room broke into soft, emotional laughter, some of it mixed with tears, as one by one, family members began approaching Lily and Maria, welcoming them properly for the first time, not as staff but as family. Maria, overwhelmed, turned to Daniel. "I'm so sorry I kept this from you." "We'll figure out the rest together," he said quietly. "But right now, I just want tonight to be about her." A year can change everything. And this next year changed absolutely everything for this family. By the following spring, the Whitfield estate looked much the same from the outside. The same white columns, the same magnolia trees, the same sweeping view of the water. But inside, everything had changed. Daniel had spent the months following that dinner doing something he'd never truly done before: slowing down. He restructured parts of his company to allow himself more time at home. He hired a small legal team not to protect his assets, as his lawyers had initially assumed, but to formally establish paternity and ensure Lily's future was secure regardless of what happened between him and Maria personally. And what happened between him and Maria personally surprised even them. In the weeks after the dinner, they'd agreed to take things slowly, focused first on co-parenting and rebuilding trust after years of secrecy. Daniel moved Maria and Lily into a guest cottage on the estate, not out of obligation, but because he didn't want to miss another single bedtime, another single breakfast, another single ordinary Tuesday of his daughter's life. Slowly, cautiously, something between Daniel and Maria began to shift back toward what it had been 3 years earlier, before fear and circumstance had pulled them apart. It wasn't a fairy tale rush. There were long conversations about trust, about the years lost, about how to move forward without either of them pretending the past hadn't happened. But it was real, and it was honest, in a way Daniel's relationship with Vanessa had never quite managed to be. Vanessa, for her part, had returned to her family's social circle, spinning her own version of events to anyone who would listen. But word travels fast in those circles, and most people who'd been at that dinner remembered clearly what had actually happened. A woman who refused to shake a child's hand over a photograph, and a man who chose his daughter over appearances every single time after that. Lily, now 4 years old, had no real memory of the dinner that changed everything. Only the simple, joyful understanding that she now had a big house to run around in, a father who read her bedtime stories every night he was home, and an ever-growing collection of aunts, uncles, and cousins who doted on her at every family gathering. One afternoon, nearly a year after that dinner, Daniel sat on the back porch watching Lily chase fireflies across the lawn as the sun set behind the water. Maria came and sat beside him, handing him a glass of tea. "Do you ever think about how different everything would be if Vanessa had just shaken her hand that night?" Maria asked quietly. Daniel considered the question for a long moment. "Every day," he admitted. "If she had, I probably never would have looked closely enough to notice the resemblance. I might have married someone who saw my own daughter as beneath her, and I wouldn't have known any better until it was too late." "So in a strange way," Maria said, "her cruelty saved us." "In a strange way," Daniel agreed. "It did." They watched Lily giggle as she cupped a firefly gently in her small hands, examining it with the same wide-eyed wonder she brought to everything in her small, growing world. "I used to think the biggest mistake of my life was not telling you the truth sooner," Maria said softly. "I still believe that some days. But I also believe that everything led us here, to this exact moment, and I wouldn't trade this moment for anything." Daniel reached over and took her hand, the same steady, gentle way he'd taken his daughter's hand that night in the ballroom. "Neither would I," he said. "If there's one thing this story teaches us, it's this. Character reveals itself in the smallest moments, in how someone treats a child, a stranger, someone who seemingly has nothing to offer them in return. Money and status can build an impressive house, but they can't build genuine kindness. That has to come from somewhere deeper. And sometimes the people the world overlooks, a quiet housekeeper, a small child in a second-hand dress, end up being the ones who show us who truly belongs in our lives and who never did. If this story touched your heart today, give it a like, subscribe if you're new here, and share it with someone you love. Stories like this remind us that kindness always matters, even when, especially when, no one is watching. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.